Yeah, thank you very much for joining us on this lecture by Professor Homola, whom I'm going to introduce to you. I think many of you are familiar with her and her work, but the non-present audience might want to get an impression on what you're actually doing. And Professor Homola did her PhD in anthropology in 2013. And the PhD topic was divination practices in China and Taiwan, before she then joined the Collège de France in Paris as a research fellow, and has since then been very busy publishing many texts, articles, peer-reviewed articles, and soon also a monograph on divination practices. And she is part of FAU since 2017. Yeah, it's a long time, but due to Corona, I mean, the time consciousness is shifting dramatically, as I would say. And she is now currently a professor for anthropology with the distinction, with a focus on Asia. And she is also the director of the master program, Standards of Decision Making Across Culture. And today you're going to talk about how to divine and to memorize in China. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me well? Is it okay? Good, thank you. So thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for welcoming us in this beautiful room this evening. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this late session. I hope I can keep you awake. I heard there are some important football games this evening, so maybe we miss some football fans now, but they be watching the game and listening to the lecture, we never know. So tonight I would like to raise the issue of memory in the meaning of memorization. So how to memorize knowledge, and in particular how to memorize complex knowledge and technical knowledge. And I would like to highlight what kind of techniques or skills can be used to enhance memorization, and what we can learn from other societies and other cultures, for instance, China. So as a scholar and anthropologist, I work on so-called traditional Chinese knowledge. So what it is exactly, traditional knowledge. Maybe you've all heard about so-called traditional Chinese medicine. As you might know, here you have a diagram of feet diagrams that show all kinds of correspondences between places on the feet and other parts of the body. So you can, based on this diagram, you can already see that Chinese medicine is based on a model of the body where everything is connected together through large networks of correspondences, right? For instance, the liver is said to be connected to nails, to ligaments, but it also corresponds to green color, for instance, to spring season, to anger as emotion, etc. So when people in China or elsewhere, when they start learning Chinese traditional medicine, so it's taught at specialized university in China, for instance. So the first step for these people is, even before they can make a diagnosis, they have to memorize all these correspondences. So here you have one example, but it's only one among many. They have to learn all these correlations and correspondences. And this is not an easy task. It requires years of training to be able to manipulate these networks at will and to be able to make a diagnosis out of it. So there's also another kind of traditional knowledge, one that gives information not on health or the body, but that gives information about the past and future of people, that are broadly called Chinese divination. And here I can use some picture. This is the office of a diviner in Beijing, a picture I took in 2010. So here there's the title of his office, and he also describes the kind of techniques that he uses to, and he welcomes the clients in his office. Here, there's another picture of, this time it's not a building, an office, but it's a stroll in not far from a temple. It was taken in Kaifeng. It's in the Henan province, center of China. So there are many different kinds of divination techniques in China with many different names. But for those who don't know anything about it, to make things simple and to understand what it's about, you can consider that it's quite close to what we know here in Germany or in Europe as astrology. So the main idea here is that the fate and the character of a person is in some ways determined or influenced by the time of birth. So in Western astrology, the specific positions of stars and planets are said to influence the destiny and character of the person. And here I can show you a Chinese birth chart in a method that is, I would say, close to Western astrology. But still things are slightly different because in the Chinese case, what is important is not the planets and the stars at the moment of birth, but the exact date in the calendar. For instance, for baby who was born now, today, like October 18th, 2021, at 8:10, then this is this exact time that will influence the fate and character of this person. So this is a difference with Western astrology. And here the birth chart that you have here is actually showing the different components, the calendar components of the birth date. So this is what is specific to China. But also Chinese astrology does not rely on the same calendar as we do. So for instance, the Gregorian calendar, the date we use, like October 21st in 21, it's the Gregorian calendar. But in the Chinese, astrology is based on so-called traditional calendar. So I will come back to it later. But what is important to understand here is that this calendar is a combination of several cycles. And there's one cycle that we all know about, even people who don't know anything about China. It's the cycle of the years. So each year corresponds to an animal. That is the well-known Chinese zodiac. I'm sure you all know about it. So every year a new animal is celebrated, for instance, the year of the dragon or etc. So I would like to take this example of Chinese zodiac that everybody knows about it to raise the question of memorization. So first, I would like, as a small exercise, I would like you to help me make a list of the zodiac animals. I'm pretty sure you all heard about them. So I would like you to tell me at least some of them, some that you remember. And so don't check on your mobile, because we'll try to retrieve it from memory, right? So, and I think I'll try to write here. So does someone, I'm sure you all know, does someone know the name of an animal in English? Tiger. Sorry, tiger, yeah? Okay. So I try to write them here. Another one? Rat? Yeah, rat.
A snake.
Snake, yeah, good. A rooster, yeah. Rooster. I mentioned one just before. Dragon, yes. Probably the most well-known. Sorry? Yeah, cow. It's called ox, I think, but cow is same, yeah. Ox, cow, yeah. Goat, yeah. Monkey, yeah. Monkey. Rabbit, yeah. A rabbit. So I'm missing some. Pig, yeah, pig. Yeah, some years ago it was the pig years. Pig year, you're right. Dog, yeah. I may miss one. I have my memo. Should not. Horse, yeah. So does someone know how many there are in total? 12, yes. So are we okay here? Yes, we have 12, yeah? Okay, good. So there are actually 12 animals, as you said. and it's a cycle. It means that they have a specific order, and when we reach the end of the cycle, we start another cycle again. So what about this cycle? How to know about this cycle? How to retrieve this cycle from memory? One way to do it is start from our birth years. So maybe I can ask you if you know what sign you are. So I'm sorry, I'm going to ask about your birth year. So does someone know what sign they are? Usually a lot of people know about their own sign, right? So yes? Goat. You're goat, and when were you born? 91. Okay, so goat, 91, yeah. Someone else?
1996, rat.
96, and you're rats, okay. Okay, so that's close, that's good for us.
1997,
oh.
and it's an ox.
Ox, 1997. And I have another one in the back, yeah.
1975, and
Rat also, rats, okay. So, sorry, rabbit. Ah, we don't have it, so that's fine, yeah. Nobody else? I'm a monkey, so I'm 1980. I know I'm a monkey.
76,
Dragon, good, 76. Okay, do we have a rooster in the room?
Snake.
Snake, yeah?
It's 89.
89, a snake. Okay. 89, right?
89, yeah.
89, okay. Okay, good. And so, do we have a tiger in the room? No tiger?
The horse.
Your horse? Can you tell us?
You should know. 78.
78. Okay. So we miss a tiger, rooster, pig, and dog. Okay, so yeah, sure nobody knows?
Rooster, 1969. My parents are born.
69 rooster. Okay. 69, right? Yeah.
And tiger,
This can help.
1998.
1998. You know someone, a tiger. Your cousin is a tiger. Good. Okay. So if pig, dog are missing, but it doesn't matter. We can still try to find. So there's, as I said, there's a cycle, 12 years cycle. So this means every 12 years, the animal comes again, right? So one way to find, now I try to write the in the right order, starting with usually the rat. It's a convention, right? So we have rat 96. So can you help me with the following one? We have ox, right? Yeah. Okay. So I can write here. This generation is helping us this evening. So we have a 98 tiger, yes. Tiger 98. Do we have a 99? Yes, I think. No, we don't. Uh-huh.
Should be a rabbit, I guess.
Yeah, should be rabbit. Okay. So you get the logic, right? With 12 year cycle. So let's 99. I mean, after the people are too young, we don't have them here, right? That's a problem. So we may start with another cycle, the one starting 12 years earlier, right? So after rabbit, what do we have? Yeah, it's dragon. Dragon. So dragon is it was quite well known actually in the year 2000. There was a special year because it's dragon year, and it's, if you calculate, it's also 76 also is dragon. After dragon, so dragon is, there's the small dragon, is snake. Snake is called also the small dragon. Okay. We have snake 89.
The horse.
The horse, yeah. Then I think we have it. Yeah, the goat. Someone was born in the goat. So we're reaching the end. Then this monkey. I know I come after the goat here. Monkey, and then we have the rooster, and the two last one we don't have date for them, but it's dog and pig, right? And so we could go on with this cycle with younger people, or start with another cycle, for instance, 12 years earlier, like 1984, right? 1980, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, and so on, 91, 92, 93, 94, and 95. And then starting with another cycle, 96 right? Okay, so this was an example to show you that when we try to do this, we use kind of two things. One is our memory. We know some of these signs because we know people who were born in the dragon year and so on. And we also use some kind of computation, knowing that there is a 12-year cycle. We can retrieve them by doing some, it's not really calculation, but some computation, right, with this 12 years cycle. Okay, so the next step that diviners care about is that these animals, they are connected together. It's not only a list, right? They have connections together, so some animals are said to dominate others, some help others or oppose others, and so on. And this is the basis for to make some diagnosis regarding the person's past, present, and future. So, for instance, in this year is the year of the ox. 21 is ox, and ox is said to be opposed to goat. So this means that people this year who were born in goat years, they are said to be in opposition with the current year, and this is said to potentially create some problems, opposition, and so on. So it's possible in China and Taiwan to perform some rituals to avoid this yearly opposition, right? Okay, so now imagine a diviner, like a professional of astrology. So a person comes to the diviner and would like to know if she's in opposition with the current year, and if not, when this comes, so that she can prepare in advance and do the appropriate rituals. So when the clients go to the diviners, some of them know their zodiac signs, like some of us knew, but some don't, and some want to check also. So the diviner has to retrieve, it's his job, his knowledge. He has to find the zodiac sign. That's the basic step of his job. So how does he proceed? And actually he does exactly as we did together. So he starts from what he knows. So for instance, we have a diviner who was born, maybe I can write it. He was born in 1950, right? Yes, I can write it here. He was born in 1950, and he knows he's a tiger. Usually people know who they are, what sign they are, right? So he knows he's a tiger. So if a person comes and he asks, what's your signs? And the person says, I don't know. And he says, when were you born? I was born in 1964. 1964. Okay. So he knows 50 is tiger, 62 is also tiger because it's another cycle. And then he says, this is 2 after tigers. 2 after tigers is rabbit dragon, right? So he says, you're a dragon, okay? So this means that he doesn't have this table with him. He has to memorize the order also. Not only the name of the animals, of course, but he has to memorize the order. And yes, and of course he should not make mistakes. And So to memorize the order of the animals, diviners use a kind of memorization device, skills. And I'd like to, oh yes, here I forgot to show you the, so a diagram of the 12 Chinese zodiac animals. So you see here, they're represented as a cycle. So when you finish a cycle, you just start another one. So to be able to memorize the order of the cycles, they kind of project this cycle on their hand. It's a conventional way to do it. So when they do this, they all do the same way. And here you can see that they rely on the morphology of the hand. So if you look at your hand, the tips of the fingers and the bottom of the fingers and the joint of the index and the little finger, they make a kind of chart, circular chart with 12 positions, which is match perfectly the 12 animals. So as you can see that the thumb has no position, and it's used to count, putting the thumb on the position, like counting on your fingers, but using the thumb to do this. So it's used to count by touching the position. So if we take an example of a diviner who was born in 1950, so he knows he's a tiger, so he put his thumb on the tiger position, which is here at the bottom of the index, and he counts until 64, because the client was born in 64. So it's like this: 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64. Here, oh, this is the dragon position. So then he can tell the person, you're a dragon, right? With training, diviners can do it quicker. They know that 1950 and 62 are both tigers, so they directly start here at 62. So they don't have to spend time counting around. So they count 62, 63, 64. Oh, this is the dragon position. So very quickly they can tell the person, oh, 64, you're a dragon. And here you can see that being quick and of course right, it's part of the knowledge and the skill and know-how of the diviner. So this kind of memorization techniques is a special knowledge. So it's not really secret, but only trained diviners know about it. And it's also used to impress the clients. So they see him do this and they don't understand what he's doing, and they think, oh, he's good. He knows some special things and special knowledge. So it's part of the know-how of the diviner. Now if you imagine a younger person comes, for instance, a younger person born in 1999. Let's take this example. So it's quite far from 1950, right? So if he has to count, it's going to take time. And the more you count, the easier it's to make some mistakes, right? So what the diviner can do here, he relies on other person he knows. For instance, he has a son born in 1988. So 1988 is 11 years before 99. So he knows 11 years is one full cycle minus one. So he knows, for instance, his son who was born in 88, he's a dragon, so he puts his finger on the dragon position, and he says 99 is one position before. So he just go backward once, and this is a rabbit. So he says, oh, you're a rabbit. So you see the diviner can rely on different references, relatives, friends, so that he can compute quicker. Okay, so as I said, knowing the zodiac sign of a person is a first step, but it's only useful if you can make a diagnosis out of it. So if you remember, I said that the signs are connected together, and so they can be in opposition. And I said, so this year, the ox year is in opposition with the goat year. And this connection, this is also something that he has to learn by heart to be able to very quickly give a diagnosis to the person. And these connections, they are easier to remember if they are represented in space on the hand. Here I can put here the connection. So the hand or the cycle shows the logic and shows that there is a central symmetry and maybe it's clearer on this one. So I said the ox is in opposition with goat. And you see this is the one across the central symmetry, right? Dog is opposed in dragon, snake, with pig, and so on. So if you have a list like this, it's hard to get, right? But once you represent it in a cycle, or on the hand, it's the same, right? On the hand, then it's very easy. You don't even have to remember. It's just checking on your hand which sign is opposed to which other sign. Okay, so and this symmetry is only visible if you represent it on your hand or on a diagram, right? So opposition here is only one type of connection. There are many other types of connection. For instance, before two people get married, they can go to a diviner and check if their signs are said to be compatible. So this is another relation, and the diviner again learned this by heart, and he's able to check and say very quickly, oh, these two signs will get on well, and these two will not. So here I took this example of the yearly zodiac signs to show how the specialists rely on their body to support their cognitive processes of memorization and also calculation. So you may think that it's a bit too simple, for instance, to have two persons being who should not get married because they are in opposition, right? So because the years of birth were in opposition. But here I only took the easiest example. So you should further imagine that the other components of the birth date, so the months, day, and hour, they also have their own signs, calendar signs. This is not animal signs, but calendar signs. And actually, each component has not one, but two signs. And the diviner learns to remember and to retrieve these signs. So when a client gives his birth date in the Gregorian calendar, he is able to retrieve all these signs from his memory. So when years combine with months, day, and hours, you can imagine the number of cases and the kind of computation that need to be made. So all this information about the birth date signs, so the zodiac animals, but also the other, they can also be found in calendars. So here I've shown an example of so this is one page of a calendar from January to June 2007. And so you can imagine a Chinese calendar is a book of this. It's a book of tables, the calendar, right? So in this table, you can find a connection between your birth date, like in October 21, and the Chinese calendar signs. So with a minimum of training, someone who can read Chinese, of course, can quite easily find their own signs looking up in a calendar. It only requires a minimum of training. But what makes the Chinese diviners specialists in this knowledge is that they can do it without the calendar. So it's like they were able to memorize the calendar. So I wanted to bring one, but I forgot, I'm sorry. It's a book with tables like this. It's this thick. And so it's like the diviners were able to memorize all this. And these are years and years of data. So you can get from the example of the zodiac animals that this is only possible because the components follow cycles, fixed cycles, and so they repeat in time in a fixed way. And this means that it's possible to calculate and to move in the future or in the past from any starting point. And to do this, diviners rely on their hand, as I showed, as a kind of computation machine or a kind of calculator. So this is why I entitled this talk, To Predict is to Remember, because before being able to make a prognostication and navigate in time, make some prognostication about the future, first you need to memorize the calendar. You need to memorize a lot of things. So these techniques on the hand is also make it possible for blind people to learn this knowledge and to use it. because you don't need to read the book, you don't need to check the calendar, right? And here I give a picture of a blind fortune teller who is working on the street in Kaifeng. So the fortune teller is he's the guy here, and these are the clients. So he's giving a consultation, counting on his hand when necessary, and making his consultation. So historically in China, training as a professional diviner was one possible career for blind people. And they enjoy, so there are still many blind fortune tellers in China nowadays. So they enjoy a good reputation because people know they have to learn everything by heart. They cannot check the books. Many were trained from a very young age, and they cannot be accused of cheating. That is, relying on the look of the person to guess his wealth, social standing, or age, or health, for instance. So they cannot guess and make a speech based on what they actually look and not from their knowledge. Okay, so as I said, this hand memorization technique is a kind of specialized knowledge. So it's not common knowledge in China. And when I was doing fieldwork in Taiwan, and for instance, I discovered that the hand is not only used in divination, it's also used in other knowledge fields, other contexts. For instance, in rituals, in Taoist rituals, so when the monks have to perform a very complex ritual with several steps, they can use their hand to memorize the order of the steps they need to follow, right? It's also used in Chinese medicine, I mentioned at the very beginning, to learn all the cosmological correspondences. It's used in mental arithmetic, and it's also used in orientation by scouts. And here I can give you an example of this. It's a diagram that was written by a scout in Taipei who explained to me that he had learned on his hand how to orientate himself at night by merely looking at the moon. So first, he needed to look at the lunar phase, so in which phase the moon is at that moment, then at the time, and computing these two parameters, he was able to know in which direction the moon was. So here on the diagram, we can see the parameters. So here we have the time, you can see. The time is combined with the lunar phase here in a table, right? And here, depending on these two parameters, you can find where the moon is located, either east, north, west, or south. So this is one example where a similar body-based memory technique can be used. So in this example here, we can see that the hand is used as a kind of orientation tool. It's like using your hand instead of a compass, right? You don't need a compass; you use your hand instead. So here it's used to orientate oneself physically in the physical world. But the other example with the diviners, it also shows that the compass can be used to orientate oneself in time. So not only in space, but also in time. And indeed, there's another tool that is used by diviners. So in addition with the hand or the calendar, and here I picked a picture of a compass. It's a Feng Shui compass that is used by Feng Shui masters. And here we have like a lot of different cycles that are represented on the same object, and it can be all this. The data can be connected together by rotating the compass and adjusting it to the current situation. So the one question is, why are these tools necessary? So the hand or the compass. So studies in cognitive sciences show that our brain actually has difficulties to combine several series together. And actually, even two series is already too much for our brain. It's very difficult to combine two series. For instance, we have the series of the 12 animals and the series of the year. And even combining this is very difficult. So for instance, if you don't rely on anything and you try to think, oh, I know dragon is 76. What is rabbit? So you have to think about what is come after dragon and then add 1 and 1 and 1. This is very complicated. This is And usually we can't do it. That's why we need to rely on an external support. And so to kind of alleviate the cognitive load. And in cognitive anthropology, this is called distributed cognition, so using external support to perform some operation or computation so that it's easier to make. And so body-based techniques are particularly efficient to memorize series of elements, so we've seen that, and combine them together. So there's one example that we all know about. It's this, how to remember the length of months. Right? You all know this, right? And this is very similar to the hand technique I showed you before. It's also relying on the morphology of the hand, on the knuckles, one high, one low, one high, one low, and combining two series. So one series is the months, January, February, March, and so on. And the second series is 30, 31, 30, and so on. So again, to combine these two series, we have this body-based help as an external support. So this example shows that it's not specifically Chinese, right? This hand memory technique. But what is peculiar with China is that the extent to which it's used, because it's adapted to the structure of traditional knowledge, which has a 12-based system. So the 12 table with 12 squares of the hand can be used for that. And also because Chinese cosmology is made of huge networks of correspondences, it's about combining series together. So this is why it's particularly used in China. Okay, I try to move quicker to the end. So now I would like to make some other comparisons to highlight that there are different ways to memorize things that pertain to different kind of memories. And so you may know that in European history, there is also a long tradition of memorization technique. And I can show you here, yeah. And in Europe, they are called arts of memory. So it's an important field of research in history with the famous work by Francis Yates, sorry, I made a mistake. So in his book, she traces the history of the European mnemonic tradition from some Greek and Roman antiquity up to the Renaissance. And she explained that it played a role in the beginning of the scientific method in the 17th century. And a major memorization technique that was used in ancient Greece and Rome by orators and poets was called the method of places and images. It's also called memory palace. So maybe you have heard about it, I don't know. It's still used nowadays. Some people train their memories with this technique. So if you're curious, you can have a look on YouTube. You can find some videos on how to use this technique in your everyday life. Right? So this mnemonic consists in moving mentally through a familiar place. So for instance, your home. And you put striking images that are relating to the things you want to remember. So for instance, you want to make a shopping list. So you need to buy banana, milk, and bread. And you can use this technique instead of writing a shopping list, as we all do, right? So mentally, you have to imagine yourself in your kitchen, and you put banana on top of the fridge, milk under the table, and bread into the sink of your kitchen. And later, when you are in the supermarket, you need to remember what you need to buy. So you imagine yourself walking in your kitchen, you look on the top of the fridge, oh, banana, under the table, oh, milk. You look into the sink, oh, bread, I need to buy this, right? So using this technique, you can retrieve things at will by walking through the place again, right? So in ancient Rome, for instance, the lawyers used it when they wanted to memorize their speech and the cases they were working on. And very funny is that one criticism of this technique is that actually you need to remember more things that was needed initially. You need to remember the fridge, the sink, the table, and so on. But because it relies on familiar elements, combined with some striking elements. So here the striking element is to put the banana on top of the fridge, right? This is not usual. So because it's both familiar and striking, it actually doesn't represent an additional cognitive burden, but it helps organize the knowledge. So this is why it's actually working. It's not more things to remember, it's helping you to remember. So here you may see some similarity with the Chinese method based on the hand. So there's this aspect of visualization, and also it's useful to memorize lists, series and lists of things, and things that you can retrieve backwards or forwards from any starting point. And for instance, in ancient Rome, the lawyers who had prepared their speech, with connecting arguments in a very convincing order, and when the magistrate asks a question, they can directly jump to one specific point of their speech, and they can retrieve their speech and move forward or backward depending on what they want to say. So this is how it was used at that time. So very interestingly, these Western techniques, they were very important in the Middle Ages and in Renaissance. And at that time, they were transmitted to China by Matteo Ricci. And he wrote a book directly in Chinese, to sum up this European technique. He wanted to introduce them to the Chinese scholars because he thought it would be very useful to them. And indeed, you might know that in Imperial China, the administration recruited the scholars and bureaucrats based on a local and national examination, the examination system. Maybe you've heard about it. It was based on memorizing the Confucian Classics, so learning books by heart. And in the examination, they had to retrieve the books and be able to quote them from any point, right? And many scholars were renowned for their fantastic memories. They were able to memorize the 4 books from a very young age. So Matteo Ricci thought, because memorization was so important in education, the Chinese scholars would love this kind of techniques, right? And he was very surprised that they were not interested at all, actually. And so Michael Lachner, who has worked on this, put forward 2 main explanations to explain why the Chinese scholars were not interested in these skills. And this is linked to different conception of memory and different organization of memory. So the first explanation is that there's a difference between the alphabetic writing and the ideograms. So the Western arts of memory, they were based on the creation of striking image, the example I showed you. But the Chinese characters, they are already in themselves some kind of images. And sometimes they already have some mnemonic component. So there's no sense of creating more images to attach images to a character. And sometimes this even makes the text ridiculous. And these texts were sacred for the Chinese scholars. And so I can give you an example. It's my own. So if you imagine a Confucian notion, and the Chinese character for this notion has a sign of the chicken, which is only used for pronunciation. But if you use this to remember, this notion, this is chicken, right? This is quite disrespectful to this Confucian notion. And it was the way the Chinese scholars understood it. It was a disrespectful way to remember the Chinese characters. So that's one point. The second point is that there was actually a different conception of memory between Matteo Ricci and the Chinese scholars. So in Europe, these techniques were also called artificial memory, meaning that they were practical tools. So Matteo Ricci, actually, when he went in China, he used this technique and he impressed the Chinese scholars because he was able to remember very quickly 400 Chinese characters that the Chinese scholars had put randomly. And he was able to remember them so quickly, the scholars were very impressed. But at that time, in China, memory was considered not as something artificial or practical, but as a natural gift based on learning by heart. And to make it something artificial, it was actually to miss the very purpose of learning by heart, which meant to obtain through constant repetition a kind of revelation of the deep meaning of the classics. And if you use tricks to kind of bypass this long repetition, then you miss the purpose of learning the classics. So the scholars, they did use some, the Chinese scholars, they did use some mnemonic techniques, but it was mainly based on rhymes and parallel structures that would help memorize the text, but not on tricks or like Matteo Ricci introduced. So to conclude now, because it's time, so here we have two different traditions of memorization in China, which have different status. And this also raises the question on how much should memory be assisted. So in some cases, it's not suitable that memorization is assisted. So on one hand, we have one tradition which is highly valued, that is memorizing through repetition, that leads to kind of internalize the knowledge and assimilate the knowledge. And this is how the highly respected classics were learned in China. It's only when they have been assimilated that they can serve as a model, as a guide for action and decision making. And in this context, as I said, these memory techniques, they are not welcome at all. These shortcuts are not welcome. But for lesser minor knowledge, such as divination, then tips or tricks can be used to assimilate the knowledge more easily. So both are meant to help taking good decisions. So the classics, by relying on the examples that are given in the classics, to make your own good decisions. And in divination, it's by analyzing the cosmos and finding the best position for yourself. But the more technical knowledge, like divination, this is less valued because it's considered in some ways that the true wisdom, the sage, the figure of the sage, should be above such technical consideration. And because he's so wise, he should be able to find harmony and to take good decisions without using these kind of techniques, but only relying on a kind of innate or supernatural knowledge and not relying on tricks. So I think I'll stop here because it's late, and I hope you get that there are these different kinds of memory and memorization and different stages they can have also, taking the example of China. So thank you very much for your attention, and we have time for questions now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your really interesting kind of presentation on how to memory dates, how to memory Chinese characters. It's this difficulty that we as sinologists are always facing. We all have developed our own tricks and techniques, so to say. But the floor is open for questions.
Are there any specific cases where a scholar was kind of caught using this technique, or was punished?
Maybe you can repeat the question.
The question is if there was a scholar in, I assume you mean traditional China or contemporary, who was kind of punished or caught in using this kind of techniques?
I don't know.
These shortcuts?
Yeah, I don't know about it, but actually the one who memorized the classics by repetition and the one who used this technique for divination, they were the same people, most of them. Because this was an imperial China, it was also an elite knowledge. So the scholars, bureaucrats, the same that were reading the classics, they were also doing this for themselves or for friends and so on. So they were highly interested in divination techniques. But so I never heard about such case, but I imagine that these were two different techniques pertaining to different fields, even though the same people would do both. But they were kind of separating the techniques. One reason being that the sacred aspect of the classics and that understanding of the classics only comes from repetition in time and assimilation of the knowledge. So here maybe a main difference between these two types of knowledge is that the classics, of course, they are text, right? It's a discursive knowledge. It's a text with a beginning, a middle, and end, and so on. But the knowledge, divination knowledge, and a lot of knowledge that are based on Chinese cosmology, they are not discursive knowledge, but data-based. You have to learn this series of correspondences. It's like learning tables. So these are different knowledge, and I would say different memorization techniques that are adapted to this different kind of knowledge.
Other questions?
How often do they repeat the tables? Is that something they do constantly? Or?
The question is, how often are the tables actually repeated that you have shown?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So first, maybe I should say that the tables, did I show you some tables? Yeah, the calendar, but so the way to represent this knowledge in tables, it's something that is quite new. It's only when this knowledge became more and more popularized in the general population that there were some handbooks that were published with tables. And tables, they show the logic, right, of this. And they are easy to remember. But before this popularization period that started, I would say, in the 1980s in China, 1980s, 90s, before this, there were almost no written document. And they would learn this by heart. So learning the technique and learning also some poems, some rhymes. So they were combining very short poems and the hand to be able to retrieve all this knowledge. So the thing is that if you don't have the tables that you can consult, right, you need to know it by heart. And typically this kind of database knowledge, if you don't use it often, you forget it. It's like doing math. If you don't train, you knew it, you knew how it worked, but suddenly you don't know anymore. So you have to train all the time. And it's quite frequent that some part-time diviners or semi-professional diviners or only amateurs, they only perform it, some time, 2 times to help some friends. And it's a very, it happens often that they make mistake because they forget, they don't train enough. Professional diviners, they do it every day, so of course they don't forget. But it's like math. It's like, if you don't practice every day or often, it's very easy to like make small mistakes, to forget. And I saw it happen several times when working with amateurs or people who don't do it for as a profession. Yeah.
But if I can add a question, because I think there was someone else raising a question. Is the reason why this knowledge is primarily transmitted orally due to a lack of literacy, or is it a lack of paper? Is it kind of too time-consuming to actually write down the whole table?
Yes, so it's not because it's too time-consuming. So there's one aspect of literacy, because this knowledge used to be transmitted orally. And so many people who could not read, like all the blind fortune tellers, could use it without being able to read a book. And it's also it enables also people who can't read classical Chinese who to
a question of literacy.
Yes. Yeah. So it's one aspect, but second aspect is also a question of controlling the knowledge. Because it's a special knowledge used by professionals, and they want to control this knowledge so that it doesn't spread and that everybody knows how they do it. So otherwise, they just lose their job. So it's also about controlling the knowledge. Yeah. So these 2 aspects.
Okay.
Yes, I'm curious how Western astrologers or diviners memorize. Is it different than how they work and they also have to memorize their charts, or yes, how does that work, or is it?
So the question is, how do Western astrologers actually learn the things they should know?
I don't know, but I wish I knew, and I could ask. Actually, that would be very interesting to compare. So they do have cycles also. But I don't know. I'm very curious.
I imagine that question will maybe answer tomorrow because we have a lecture about astrology tomorrow here at 6 p.m. And you're very welcome to come.
So there's a lecture on Western astrology tomorrow at 6 that might answer all these questions.
In our society, astrology does not have a very good reputation with many people. So I would like to know what is the status of these techniques in modern day China, especially in the Republic of China, and not in Taiwan.
So the question is, I mean, astrological knowledge in Europe is often kind of considered to be the lesser art, kind of a superstitious practice and so on. So what is the actual situation in the People's Republic today on this kind of traditional knowledge?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So I would say it's a bit similar than here, but the condemnation of such practices as kind of superstition is more recent. It started in China at the beginning of the 20th century, where with the end of the empire and the nationalist revolution, focusing on science and progress. It was the time when this kind of practice were excluded from the academia because it used to be studied by scholars, so it was excluded from academia, it was excluded from the religious fields and targeted as superstition. But because this process is quite recent and it took many time, despite many governmental policies to eradicate this so-called superstition, they never really succeed. The Cultural Revolution in the 60s in China maybe was the one period where these practices were really forbidden and people wouldn't risk showing it in public. But then as soon as China reopened in the 1980s, there was a kind of revival of these techniques. So they are still officially condemned and even in some aspect illegal in China, but still widely practiced. So there's very, I would say, ambiguous status. A lot of people practice them. They are officially not allowed, but including party members in China are well known for consulting diviners. And so much that I think in 2016, Xi Jinping, the president, officially forbade the party members, the CCP party members, to engage in superstitious activities that meant actually consulting diviners. Because there have been some cases of some fortune tellers influencing high-profile government officers and so on. So very ambiguous situation also in China.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Well, I have a question. So since you are an anthropologist, I wonder, have you noticed any recent, I guess my question would be, how does recent technologies influence the use of this memorization? I would suppose that younger generations, younger diviners are more open to using technologies instead of memorizing all these charts. They would, all the big data and AI generated results, you just put your birthday on it and the automated generated results will present to you. But older generations or older diviners might still have this very have this feeling that they possess the authentic way of divining. So I wonder, how have you noticed any phenomenon or trend or conflict between the younger diviners and the older diviners? How does technology influence?
Yeah, this question was addressing the problem of technology or the issue of technology. I mean, when we started, you just told us not to look at our mobiles. But what happens if now the younger generation is increasingly relying on this readily accessible technology as opposed to the older generation that is still relying on this memory techniques? Is there a gap? What changes there?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as I said with the one previous question, it's a kind of, it's like math, you know, so this is all determined cycles. So this can be put in the software, and on the internet you can calculate everything on using dedicated software or also on your mobile. So a lot of people do it, but I would say there's a position is maybe not so much of generations, but of type of diviners. So, for instance, if you're a street diviner working in the street, the passers-by are going on, and you want to stop them. So, if they stop, and you need to impress them with your know-how and skills. So, if you take your mobile and calculate, oh yes, you're a dragon. I mean, he could do it by himself, right? And people probably think that. So you have to show your expertise, and this is the basic step of the expertise. And because you're able to do this technical step that any computer can do, then they can trust you on being a good diviner for the interpretation, right? But if you're another kind of diviner, typically, you're right, younger generation of diviner, the one who were not trained by masters on this very controlled transmission of knowledge, but the one who trained with books, handbooks, even on the internet, taking classes. So this is more open knowledge, and they don't so much focus on this technical aspect, so they would rather use the computer, so they make the calculation very quickly, and then they can spend more time on the interpretation. But what is also important to know is that, also related to the previous question, is that if you use too much the technologies, mobile and so on, at some point you forget the logic behind, and the younger generation, some of them even never learned it, because you don't need to learn the logic if it's just using your mobile. And so there's some part of the knowledge that might be lost here, and it's also why some diviners also focus on the technique and teach the technique, so that the logic behind and the knowledge of this cosmology, of the calendar, how to read the calendar, this is also not lost. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I hope to see you all back tomorrow or at the weekend at the many events that are following. And thank you very much for your attendance and your interest in this lecture.
Thank you very much.